Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is idagio.com time. It is Thomas Hampson on Thursday. I haven't been live for a while. You wouldn't know that because you've been seeing other shows that we've been doing behind the scenes, but it's great to be back with you live and with a wonderful guest, someone whom I've never met personally, and since I don't play the violin, probably wouldn't have everything to do with her musically, unfortunately. Jennifer Koh is one of the most exciting artists on the scene today, as we say. But first and foremost, this is idagio.com. This is Idagio Talks. And Idagio.com is the streaming platform for classical music, the go-to database for made by classical musicians for the classical user interface. It's where you want to have your classical music experience. And one of the most exciting things, about a year ago, Idagio.com launched the Global Concert Hall. And the Global Concert Hall, at that time, of course, was a purely digital experience. It has now been morphing into a digital and analog experience, and that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight, because Jennifer has a wonderful new program on the Global Concert Hall. You want to go to idagio.com and check it out. It's quite fun. I'll show you that a little bit later. I'll show you how to use the web-based Idagio app a little bit later, but I want to get right to Jennifer Koh and welcome you to idagio.com, Idagio Talks. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're here, Jennifer, I do want to talk about your program. I want to talk about the various recital series. I want to talk about you commissioning more commissions. I mean, by the way, with all the commissions, well, you've done personally 40 commissions?
Actually, it's been over 100.
Over 100 commissions.
Pieces written for me. Yeah.
Does that mean at Christmas you get fruit baskets delivered like a week, a week long?
Lovely. That's never happened.
Well, they should. They should be sending you fruit baskets every Christmas.
Well, it's wonderful to have an opportunity to be part of this wonderful artistic community, and to be able to bring together members of the community to help each other during this COVID-19 pandemic has been incredibly meaningful to me.
Put and I want to talk about it more. I think what I would love to do is and people know that this is coming because I do this a lot. I'd love for you to give us and your public on Idagio your own sort of Wikipedia. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? When did you discover the violin? When did you have that moment? I think I'm talented. I want to do this forever. Or did you want to do something completely different, like be a bank teller or something?
That sounds terrible. So I was born outside of Chicago, Illinois. Both of my parents emigrated to the United States in the 1960s. There used to be immigration laws against non-Western European immigrants from coming to the United States. Yeah. And that law changed in 1965. I think as a result of that, you actually see politically what happened 4.5 years ago. But in any case, my parents have been refugees during the Korean War. My mother went to the United States for graduate school, and she got her PhD in 3 years, and ended up teaching at a university outside of Chicago, which is how I ended up there.
Okay.
And because she was a refugee, she wanted me to have everything that she did not have growing up. That included consistent schooling, it included ballet, it included swim team, and violin was one of those things.
Are your parents musical?
No, no, not at
all. Most of our colleagues, when I ask that question, we all have that reaction. They go, oh no, oh no.
they like to joke that they play the stereo, so they play the radio.
My dad, but he had so. And do you have brothers and sisters? You mind me asking?
I'm an only child.
You're an only child, so you got all the focus of music. Whose idea was it to have you look at a violin? Were you just struck by the sound, or was it part of his schooling? It just happened to happen on your hands, or how?
It just happened that.
How did that happen?
My parents went to the local music school, and violin was the only opening. So that's how violin happened.
Does that mean if a viola or a cello had been the only opening, you would become a famous cellist?
I don't know if famous, but I probably would have played that instrument. But I was really lucky because I had a wonderful violin teacher who was the person who advocated for me to continue studying. So
And
perhaps if I didn't have her, I would not be a musician today.
my fate was much more cruel. There were no strings in my. We were American band stuff in the Northwest, so there were no strings around. There were a couple of eccentric guys that played the cello, and I thought that was pretty cool. There were some saxophones, but I ended up on the tuba. But that's another story. Fate called me to the tuba until I became a choir member, and that was a lot of fun. Were you immediately attracted to the violin, or the stories of you as a 3-year-old going, "Mommy, what's that on the radio"?
I was immediately attracted actually to opera. So the first music I actually heard was Mozart, Figaro, Mozart, Magic Flute, and I just fell in love with that music.
Wow,
So that's actually
wow.
how, how I ended up in music.
When I look at your discography, I don't see a lot of Mozart. Are you still
Um,
passionate about Mozart?
yes, still passionate about Mozart, still passionate about many things, Bach included. I'll be going to Paris to do a production actually with Robert Wilson, who does productions of opera, and Lucinda Childs
Right.
doing choreography, and we co-created this fully staged work on all 6 sonatas and 50 days of Bach. So that was, of
Rob
course,
Wilson is a genius, unbelievable.
he's wonderful. I think we truly connected while we were doing Einstein on the Beach together. So this is a
Where did you go
personal
to
project.
school? Going backwards, where did you go to school? Because you talk about a private teacher, obviously, but was the music education always separate from just going to school? Or
Yes,
did
well,
you go to music
as
school from the beginning, or private school, or public school? Or I mean, what were the
the
extracurriculars like? Did you play volleyball, badminton, ping pong, baseball?
I was on swim team, so I was in the Junior Olympics, if you can believe it. Um, but
Very
everything,
cool.
unfortunately, in the United States, music programs have been cut from public schools. So the school I went to was a private music school, and then
Right.
kind of the rest of my schooling was separated from music studies.
Did you have to do a lot of competitions?
Not particularly, although I think because I did not kind of come from a musical background, that was a pathway to access, I think, to the classical music world.
Right. When what would you consider not just a matter of a debut, but what was the first time you were standing in front of an orchestra playing, or what was it, an orchestra, which maybe was just a piano, where you were playing the violin and you had that thought, I'm doing this. I am a violinist. How old were you, and what were you playing? Do you remember?
I think, it just felt like it was part of my whole being. So it never, I think maybe because I started so young at 3 years old,
Yeah.
it never felt separate from me, if that makes sense. It was a part of
Huh.
my little vocabulary from really young age. In fact, I think I probably knew how to speak through music before I could even do it through like language. So it just
Wow.
always felt like an organic part of who I am. It was really disconcerting when COVID-19 hit because I realized I had never gone that long without performing since probably I was 3 years old. And so it
Yeah.
was almost shocking to go back to one live performance because For a moment, I was like, can I still do this? It's been like 6 months since I played in public, but
Yeah.
thank God it was still possible.
Wasn't there a New York Times article or some article somewhere I read where you were one of the examples of somebody whose career was just huge trajectory? Getting that wrong, or
Um, I totally lost you for a second because of reception, but I
right?
think you said something
No, no.
about
I asked you whether
yeah.
what there was an article about you about musicians and what COVID was doing to our industry, and industry is a horrible word, but to musicians, and I believe you were referenced as this tremendous trajectory in all of these projects, and you were just stopped cold, and there were some very poignant quotes of yours about that. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, I think it's very different, of course, in the United States because there's less of a kind of cushion. And when one is a freelance artist, I had many colleagues and friends who, for example, I had one friend that was playing in an orchestra which immediately furloughed its members. She had had a baby in February and she lost her health insurance by April. And so she and her husband actually had to move back in with her parents. And so these were the conditions that artists and performing artists have been having to live with in the United States. And it's quite difficult
I think
and yeah.
all over. I mean, and we don't need to go into this too much, but most of the, and I'm talking to our public, most of the time when you hear about money being invested into helping arts organizations, especially in Europe, it is about the organizations and not the artists. The trickle down has been not just anemic, it's been obscene. And there have been literally lives lost and livelihoods lost. It's been, this 18 months has been absolutely decimating to the world of the arts and the performing arts. The pay for play musicians have been demonstrably neglected by any considerations of how to compensate for a world. All of it became victim of the force majeure contract that every presenter was more than happy to hide behind before they had to pay any kind of compensation for lost work. It is, and I'm saying that generally. I guess I'll ask you: did you have? I certainly had that, and most of the colleagues in the singing world that I know had this problem. Was that also a problem for you?
Yes, I mean, as a freelance artist, as you know, and everything was just. I remembered in one day I returned from being on tour, and I had one day that I was going to be home, and then I was going to leave the following day. And on that one day, every half hour, every single concert canceled. It was amazing.
Unbelievable. Look, we could talk about so many things, Jennifer, but I know that you're on a very tight schedule, and it's so nice that you
I'm so
spend
sorry.
time with us. Tell us, tell us about. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to do very quickly is go to screen share, and when I go to screen share, the next thing you should see should be. Good grief! What have I done? Let's see if I can get this right. Yes, here we go. I think I got it right. This you should see. This is Jennifer Koh's website, and we'll talk about your project Alone Together. But I'm also going to show you, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Global Concert Hall on the idodjo.com website, and you can see that her program on this Alone Together is available until the 2nd of October. It started its first performance on July 10. It's very, very exciting. I've been listening to it, as you can see. I've been dropping in listening to it. It was recorded in the Fraser Performance Studios in Boston. You can see that. You have, let's see, Jennifer, you had this wonderful person where you have this conversation about what you're doing, but about the program and so forth. Can you tell us about this program? You are still here, and from Alone Together. Tell us what we're hearing in the Global Concert Hall.
I think one of the things that was remarkable about this project was seeing how much my colleagues cared about the future of classical music. So many of my colleagues who were had salaried positions recommended their freelance colleagues who were composers to be commissioned by my nonprofit, Arco Collaborative. And it was, I never thought of it at that time, but it's kind of become an emotional archive, I think, of those first months of the pandemic. And I remembered waking up after that day that we spoke about where every single thing canceled, and of course I was panicked. And I remembered waking up the next day realizing that I was really lucky. And I think, as you know, Thomas, as musicians, we always have to imagine the end before we start the work. And so I imagined the end of the pandemic. And I looked back and, you know, I wanted to be able to look back and know what kind of person I was. Was I going to be somebody that helped others, or was I going to be somebody that only worried about myself? And I wanted to be somebody who took care of my community. And so that's how this project
That's, I mean, that's beautiful. That's absolutely wonderful. And you've been so successful at it. I noticed this phrase on your website, social activism through music. I rather like that. And as you described your relationship to the violin and how it's just seems to be so much part of you, it probably seemed very natural in any display of your humanity that the violin is your medium through which to communicate. Ergo, all of these amazing commissions. In case you tuned in late, this woman is responsible for over 100, personally 100 commissions, which means that she started commissioning when she was 3.5 years old. So I mean, it is extraordinary. What does "Alone Together" mean as a title?
So I was in New York City in March and April, and at that time, New York City was hit the hardest of all other places with COVID-19, and it was frankly horrific. I think because it's such a condensed city, we were all living near hospitals, and we heard the sirens, we saw the trucks, and it was really terrible. But I remembered speaking to a friend of mine, because none of us were leaving our apartments. And we said to each other, we're alone, but we're together. And we're in this together. So that, through my friends, that was how I got through that period. But now when I speak to people outside of New York that didn't go through that, they say that everybody they know that was living in New York has PTSD from that period of time.
You are a social activist. You're very concerned about the part of our society being left behind. You are as engaged in Asian violence as so many of our black colleagues are engaged in black violence and, of course, historical racism. Alone Together, social activism, violence, discrimination, there's some common thread in that, which I feel is a far more serious problem in our society than just obviously the performing arts, but we can help with that. What more can we do? Is it just being musical, or is it time for artists to become proactive in saying no more?
I think that there was a period in time in which musicians were very active in social ideas, and that happened with Pablo Casals and Franco. It happened with Toscanini, and so it's not unfamiliar, right? That we have had a moral consciousness within our community. Of course, there's also been the opposite, and for me, it's all of these things that I've been concerned about, I just kind of integrate into the music I make and the projects that I create. And it's just about bringing awareness. I think it was interesting, there's one work that I had premiered for the New American Concerto project by Vijay Iyer, and one of the movements was dedicated to Vincent Shin. He was a Chinese American man who was beaten to death in 1982 because auto factory workers believed he was Japanese and stealing their jobs. And the name of the concerto was called Trouble, from the representative and civil rights leader activist John Lewis, who died this past year. And of course, violence against Asian Americans and Asians have increased exponentially because we had a president prior to this who blamed it racially on one group. And so unfortunately, there's a great deal of violence, including 6 women being killed.
Have you felt in danger, if I may ask?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. People who look like me have been thrown into subway tracks on an almost daily basis. So, absolutely.
It seems to me that in the performing arts, and I've been very focused of late on in celebration of black music and the Song of America project, and one of, as an artist, as a singer, as a performing artist, as an active public personality, my passion is to create neighborhood, some feeling of détente that allows us to allow each other to be ourselves. I love this alone together metaphor, that somehow a pluralism should be that. Not that we should be alone or isolated, but there's an individuality that it should be respected, tolerated, embraced, celebrated, but yet it's a togetherness, and that's our famous motto in America. That's e pluribus unum, it seems to me. But right now we're in this very dangerous time of tremendous violence. When you see what violence went on over Independence Day in July, it just takes your breath away. I mean, regardless of whether it's black or Asian or white or mom or dad or whoever the hell it is, it's just, I don't know. I mean, you on your website, you've got this social activism and music, and you've got all these portraits, and I know you're very involved in some of the more disenfranchised communities, the gay community, the LGBTQ plus community. I hope I got all those letters right. I keep missing that up. Please, I don't mean it disrespectfully. Are we living in a time where we have more and more silos of disenfranchised people? Do you think? I realize that's a sociological question, but what do you think?
I think we're living in a time where our choices make a huge impact on what will happen in the future. And I think it's, at least for me during the pandemic, it really clarified what my mission was, because it's very important to bring forward those voices that we haven't heard before. I saw, even going through the project Alone Together, I saw how systemic issues like healthcare affected those composers, and that the composers of color that were there, their families were affected and killed at a larger percentage and died than those of my kind of white colleagues, to be honest. And so we see I literally saw these systemic inequalities in healthcare and in terms of social justice and Black Lives Matter. And so it's a time that we can make the choice to be vocal about it or not. And I decided to become more vocal because I believe if I didn't do it, and if I don't do it, it will not improve, and it will not become better for the next generation. So that has been a very conscious choice. And it became a choice because at some point during the pandemic, like you and I said, we all lost our work. And I realized, so when will I have enough capital to voice these concerns? And I realized, if I don't do it now, when will I do it? And so I have somewhat of a platform, so I felt it was necessary to speak.
I promise you you'd be out by 25, and it's 24. Jennifer Koh, you're an amazing human being. You're a wonderful artist. You're a beautiful violinist. You are doing what I consider the most important thing: do good. And you certainly are. Godspeed. Wonderful film, wonderful recital series. You're getting the kind of attention you deserve. You're a champion for new music. The next interview, I want to talk about new music. We need to help our audience embrace new music. It isn't all weird stuff with no melody. And I think
Yes.
you could probably help us walk through that. Your concert on the Global Concert Hall is exciting and challenging. But yeah, I'm so glad that the pandemic is settling down and you can get back to work with this new force behind you and your new focus. You're wonderful. Thank you very much for visiting
Thank
with us.
you. Thank you so much.